Rebecca Vance had worked the telegraph key at the Panhandle depot since the rail line reached town and knew most regulars by their footsteps before she looked up. She knew Samuel Rourke before she knew his name properly. Steady, unhurried, a man who never seemed to be running late for anything in his life. He came through twice a month, sometimes more, wiring cattle prices to a buyer in Fort Worth, and he always waited for her to finish the line before he spoke, as though her work mattered enough not to interrupt. What she never noticed was how often his business could have waited a day, or gone through a hired man entirely, and did not. He found reasons. A wire that could have gone out Tuesday went out Monday instead. Because Monday was the morning, the platform light caught her hands as she worked the key. Samuel had wanted to ask for more than 4 sentences at a time for months. He had simply never found a way to do it that did not feel like leaning on the difference between what he owned and what she did not. "Prices holding?" he asked her once, nodding at a wire she had just sent for someone else entirely. "That's not my business to say." She capped her pen. "But if it were, I'd tell you to wait a week." He laughed, short and real, and tipped his hat. For a long while, that was the whole of it. A stockman and a telegraph operator, trading a few dry sentences twice a month, neither one naming the interest underneath them. Panhandle City was still new enough for fresh-cut boards to show pale on half the buildings. Rebecca liked the work because the key did not care who owned cattle or who had arrived with money. Accuracy mattered more than standing, and Samuel seemed to understand that. He never leaned over her counter or treated his name as a reason to interrupt. Once, after wading through another man's badly written message, Samuel said, "You make a man regret every unnecessary word. That's what the company pays me for." The joke stayed with both of them. Her mother's holding sat 6 miles east of town. Bought on credit the year before Rebecca's father died, the purchase money note never quite paid down, despite every economy Louisa could manage. 2 dry years, feed bought when the grass failed, and by October the foreclosure notice was posted at the county clerk's office for the whole town to read. Foreclosure sale, Vance property. Public auction. Rebecca read it in her work dress and let no one see what it cost her. Louisa was 59, widowed, proud, and without close kin who could take her in. Rebecca had $41 saved from her work at the key. It was not a number that could stop an auction. The sale drew only a small knot of buyers. Samuel bid highest without theater. The holding bordered his north pasture and made practical sense for his stock operation. He did not seek Rebecca's gratitude when it was done. 3 days later, he found her on her walk home from the depot and told her why he had bought it. The adjoining ground would shorten his cattle route. Louisa could remain in the house through winter, he added, without rent, while she decided what came next. "That's kind of you," Rebecca said. "It's practical. An empty house fares worse through winter than an occupied one." She heard the kindness anyway. Word traveled. The rich rancher had bought the widow Vance's land, and now he had been seen twice walking the depot road with her unmarried daughter. Panhandle City did not need anyone to accuse Samuel openly. A lifted eyebrow at the mercantile did nearly as much work. "It doesn't sit easy," Louisa said at her kitchen table. "People talk. Let them." Louisa put down her mending. "I'm not asking you to marry for my sake, Rebecca. If the house goes, it goes. I won't have you buying it back with your life." Rebecca looked at the worn kitchen walls, at the place where her father's coat hooks still remained though his coats did not, and knew her mother meant every word. That did not make the house easier to lose. Samuel came to call the following week and asked Rebecca to walk past the depot fence where they could speak without an audience. "I'm not asking because of the land," he said. I've wanted to ask you something like this since before your mother's name was on that notice. I should have said so sooner. You're asking me to marry you." "I am. And if I say no?" His answer came without delay. "Then your mother stays through winter exactly as I said, and you and I go on speaking at the depot when you've a mind to speak to me." That answer mattered. It did not solve the rest. Rebecca asked for time. Samuel gave it and did not make a second visit to hurry her. She could have said no. Her mother had told her more than once not to marry for the house. But there was no other path Rebecca could find that kept Louisa's home. The note had already been refused more time once. Her savings were a fraction of what was owed. And every practical alternative ended with the holding gone. What made the yes possible was that Samuel was already a man she trusted and wanted to know better. What made it unfair was that she could not separate how much of her wanting belonged to him from how much belonged to the roof over her mother's head. She chose anyway, knowing the choice was real, and also knowing it had been bent by circumstances neither of them had named. "I'll marry you," she told him outside the depot in open daylight. "I'm not being talked into anything." "I know," Samuel said. He believed he did. They married at the courthouse before a justice of the peace, Rebecca in moss green. On the steps, Samuel saw relief where he had hoped for happiness. That evening, he said he had not decided how to use the full holding. Louisa could stay through winter. Rebecca set down her fork. "I thought after today there wouldn't be any question about Mother keeping her home." Because we married?" "Yes." Samuel understood what he had missed. Rebecca's yes was real, but her mother's safety had stood inside it beside him. He asked for no reassurance. "I need to put one thing right," he said. He spent the rest of the evening deciding only how to do it cleanly, not whether he meant to do it. The next business morning, he went to the county clerk's office. By evening, the house, barn, and core home tract had been conveyed unconditionally to Louisa Vance in her own name. Samuel handed Rebecca the recorded deed, folded once. "Your mother's isn't tied to anything between us more," he said. "Whatever this marriage becomes, it isn't the price of that house." Rebecca read Louisa's name across the grantee line and felt weeks of pressure fall away at once. "You did this today?" "I understood it yesterday. Today was the first day I could put it right." She did not kiss him or turn gratitude into another obligation. Samuel asked for nothing. He stepped back from the doorway and left the question of what their marriage might become where it belonged, unanswered. The deed changed the town's story faster than any defense Samuel could have made. Edith Pritchard stopped halfway through a fresh remark at the mercantile when another customer mentioned the filing. Calvin Brooks at the depot said he had seen Mrs. Vance's name on the record himself. Peter Weller, the county records clerk, corrected a man near the courthouse who called the place Rourke's land. "The home tract belongs to Mrs. Vance," Peter said, "recorded that way. No one organized an apology. No one needed to." The pause before Rebecca's name simply began disappearing from ordinary conversation. And then the town, having lost the facts it needed to keep the uglier version alive, moved on. What remained was harder and more private. Rebecca and Samuel were married, but the reason that had made the marriage feel necessary no longer existed. Neither of them knew yet what would replace it. For several days after that, nothing dramatic happened. Rebecca went to the depot. Samuel went to the stock pens. They ate supper at the same table and spoke with courtesy. But the deed had removed the old explanation for their marriage before either of them had found a new one. The uncertainty was cleaner now, and therefore harder to hide from. A few days later, Samuel asked Rebecca whether she would like to walk into town after her shift, no errand attached. She considered it. "Not tonight. Mother asked me to help with her winter stores, and I'm tired besides." "All right." That was all. He did not ask again that week or make her refusal cost her anything. The no remained exactly what she had said. No to a walk on one evening. Rebecca noticed. The following week, she found him in the front room before supper. If that walk you offered still stands, I'd like to take it now." Samuel looked up from the paper in his hand. "It stands." They took the depot road in the cold, talking about nothing urgent. He told her about a stubborn calf that had cost him 2 hours. She told him about a telegram from a cattle buyer who believed punctuation was an insult to commerce. How many words did he waste?" Samuel asked. 11, if I am charitable. 15, if I count the ones that said nothing. And you charged him for everyone? I am a professional." Samuel smiled. "Remind me never to send you a love letter by wire." The remark surprised them both. He looked away first, toward the rail line. Rebecca could have rescued him from it with a joke. Instead, she said, "A sensible man would learn to be concise." "I've been trying for years." Somewhere before the turn home, Rebecca realized she had stopped measuring the evening by usefulness. She had simply wanted his company. Over the next weeks, the courtship they had skipped before marriage began arriving afterward in small pieces. Samuel learned she took her coffee black and read later into the night than sense allowed. Rebecca learned that the part of a ranch day he liked best was not buying or bargaining, but the quiet moment when a count came right, and every animal was where it ought to be. He remembered details she had mentioned once. She began saving observations she knew would make him laugh. One evening she told him why she had stayed at the telegraph desk when some people in town had assumed she would give it up after marriage. "I like knowing a thing can cross 200 miles because I put my hand to the key correctly," she said. "It is small work until someone is waiting for the message." "Then it isn't small at all." Samuel nodded. "I don't suppose work has to be large to matter." "No, it only has to be yours." He remembered that sentence. At a winter social, they both endured more than enjoyed. Samuel stayed long enough to satisfy courtesy, and then found Rebecca near the door, fastening her gloves. "You could stay and dance," he said. "I won't mind." "I know. Do you want to?" Rebecca glanced toward the crowded room, then back at him. "I'd rather walk." So they did. They left together in full view of the room, because Rebecca had chosen his company over another hour inside. Its ordinariness was precisely what made it important. A week later, Rebecca went out to the stock pens for no reason she could defend as practical. Samuel had not asked her to come. Her mother needed nothing. There was no message to deliver. She had finished her shift early, looked at the road leading home, and taken the other one instead. Jonas Kell, Samuel's senior stockhand, was red-faced when she arrived. He had shut the wrong sorting gate and sent half a small group of yearlings back into the pen they had just cleared. 2 younger hands had noticed. So had Samuel. Jonas muttered an apology and reached for the latch. Samuel did not raise his voice or make Jonas explain himself in front of the others. "We can sort them again," he said. "Take the east gate this time. I'll hold the near side." Jonas gave one short nod. 10 minutes later, the animals were where they belonged. His embarrassment had nowhere left to grow, and Samuel had already moved the younger hands on to the next task. Only then did he see Rebecca by the fence. He came toward her, brushing dust from his gloves. "Everything all right at the depot?" "Yes. Your mother?" "She's fine." Samuel waited, plainly puzzled but not displeased. Rebecca felt the foolishness of having no reason and decided not to invent one. "I came to see you." His expression changed by only a little, but she saw it. "I'm glad you did," he said. He did not make more of the sentence than she had given him. He showed her the pen they were repairing and let her stay without turning the visit into a promise. Rebecca stayed near the fence while they finished. Samuel worked rather than performed, listened when Jonas suggested moving a hinge, and disagreed once without making rank the point of it. None of it was dramatic. That was what Rebecca trusted. The deed had shown her what Samuel would do after discovering he'd held too much power over her. The stock pens showed her what he did with smaller kinds of power every ordinary day. She carried that knowledge home. A few nights later, he rode to the far pasture and did not return until well after dark. Rebecca ate, read half a page twice, and finally looked across the table at his empty chair. The house lacked nothing she strictly needed. The stove was warm. The lamps were trimmed. Her mother's home was safe 6 miles away. Still, she missed him. There was no debt in missing someone. No bargain in wishing a particular set of footsteps would sound on the porch. When they finally did, Rebecca looked up too quickly and Samuel caught her at it. "Something wrong?" he asked. "No," she said, and this time the answer made her smile. "Nothing at all." Samuel, meanwhile, had begun watching himself too closely. He had corrected the material wrong as soon as he understood it. Now he feared committing a quieter one, by acting as though marriage itself entitled him to warmth Rebecca had not offered. His caution became so deliberate that what felt to him like respect began to feel to her like distance. He stopped saying that he had missed her company. If their hands brushed, he pulled back before the touch could settle. Once, when Rebecca sat beside him on the settee, Samuel shifted an inch away, as though proximity itself might be an imposition. Rebecca stared at the new space between them. "Do I offend you?" Samuel looked as startled. "No." "Then stop fleeing furniture." He laughed despite himself, but the distance returned in other forms. She endured it another week before finding him in the one evening, mending a harness beneath a low lamp. "You've gone careful with me, Samuel. More careful than before the deed." He set the leather down. "I don't want you feeling obliged to me a second time." "I don't." "Good. That wasn't the whole sentence." He looked at her then. Rebecca folded her arms. "You've been treating me like a guest you're afraid to inconvenience. I'd rather know when you want my company than have you hide every wanting. Because you're frightened I'll mistake it for a claim." Samuel was silent for a moment. "I've been afraid that saying what I wanted would sound too much like asking for it as my due." "It isn't your due, I know." "Then say it as a want, not a debt." He looked at her steadily. "I want you. I have for longer than either of us has been honest about. I look for you at the depot before I remember why I came in. I listen for your step in the hall. And half the time I think of something worth telling, I save it until supper because I want to tell you first." Rebecca felt the answer settle somewhere deeper than relief. It was not a claim. It was information she had asked him to trust her with. "All right," she said softly. "Now I know." Samuel's mouth moved at one corner. "Was that concise enough?" "Barely." The old joke returned without the old uncertainty, and Rebecca laughed first. After that, warmth stopped having to sneak around the edges of their days. Samuel could say he had hoped she would be home before supper. Rebecca could choose to sit beside him instead of across from him, without either of them pretending the choice meant nothing. They were still careful with each other, but no longer careful enough to disappear. By late December, Samuel's spring planning had begun to cover the kitchen table. Stock shipping dates, calving weeks, a February trip to Fort Worth to meet a cattle buyer, and a shorter March journey he expected would keep him away several days. One evening, while he was still at the barn, Rebecca found his calendar open beside the figures he had been working over. His travel dates were marked neatly down one side. None of hers appeared anywhere near them. Her depot shifts, the evening she had promised Louisa, the winter social she had already told him about. All of it existed on another schedule in his head, if it existed there at all. Samuel came in stamping cold from his boots and found her still looking at the page. "You've planned your whole spring," she said, "as though I live in another life from yours." He came around the table. "I didn't want to build my plans around you before I knew you wanted to be planned around. It felt presumptuous. I don't want to be planned around." He stopped. Rebecca turned the calendar toward him. "I'm not asking to run your ranch, Samuel. I don't want the ledger. I want to know when you'll be gone. And I want you to know when I'll be here. I want us working from the same paper instead of two separate ones that happen to sit in the same house. She pointed to his February trip. If you're gone that week, I'll move my late depot shift. If you know that, you don't wonder where I am. If I know this, I don't hear from Calvin that my husband is boarding a train in the morning. Samuel winced. Fair. And if your March trip can move without hurting anything, I'd like you home for the town supper. Not because you owe me. Because I'd like you there. He looked down at the calendar, then back at her. It can move. Good. Something in his face eased. Plan with me, she said. Not around me. With me. It was not a grand declaration. It was a plain sentence across an ordinary table, and that was why it mattered. The house was no longer at stake. Her mother's safety was no longer at stake. There was nothing left for Rebecca to save by saying it. She was asking for a future because she wanted the man standing across from her inside it. Rebecca reached over the open calendar and laid her hand over his. Samuel turned his hand beneath hers. With you. This time, Rebecca was the one who closed the remaining distance. She leaned across the corner of the table and kissed him once, brief and deliberate, then drew back far enough to see whether he understood. He did. That, Samuel said after a moment. I understood the first time. Good. I dislike repeating myself. The next morning, Samuel told her which 2 days he expected to be gone in February, and asked which evening suited her better for the winter social she had mentioned. Rebecca told him her late depot shift would make Friday easier. He took a pencil, crossed out the first date, and moved the plan. At breakfast, she told him she would be late the following Tuesday because Calvin needed her to cover an evening freight wire. Samuel nodded and said he would leave supper warm. Neither exchange would have sounded important to anyone listening. That was the point. It was the first ordinary week they built together, on purpose. 4 years later, Rebecca Vance Rourke still worked the telegraph key most days. Marriage had never required her to leave it, and she had never offered to. Louisa's house still stood 6 miles east on land that belonged to Louisa alone. Rebecca was closing the line one cold December evening when Samuel came through the depot door with snow on his shoulders and a folded wire in his hand. Price is holding, he asked, echoing his first excuse to speak to her. Rebecca opened the wire. 3 words. Walk home together? She looked up. 4 years, and you've finally learned not to pay for 6 words when 3 will do. I had a good teacher. Rebecca capped her pen, locked the depot door, and took his arm because she wanted to. Come on, then. They walked home through the cold past the depot fence, where he had once waited without saying why. The town had long since stopped watching. Rebecca still sent other people's urgent words across the wire, and saved her own for the walk home. What had begun under the weight of a debt had lasted without one, because after the deed removed the price, they kept choosing each other when nothing required them to. Samuel bought the land for the grazing, plain and simple, and it took a wedding gift he never had to give to remove the price that had stood between them. Which moment convinced you their marriage had become real? The deed itself, the walk Rebecca chose on her own, or the calendar they finally planned together? Tell me in the comments, and subscribe to Hidden Crown Tales for another original frontier romance. Thank you for staying with us to the end.